Welcome to We Question and Learn. We're celebrating our 20th year here on the air at WQLN. Coming up in a couple of months, we'll be into our 21st year. Very happy to have prominent guests, informative guests from around the community as we have over the last 20 years. Today, I'm honored to have Alex Cox, and he is an attorney. And the reason we asked him, or we are honored to have him here today, because the topic is, I have to confess, one of my favorites, and that's intellectual property disputes, copyrights, patents, U.S. patent and trademark things. These are all interesting things, I'm sure, to a lot of industrial people in the community, because I'm sure, Alex, they are constantly bringing you different things they'd like to talk to you about.
Yeah. First of all, thanks for having me on, Tom. The intellectual property is a interesting, complex area of the law. It's something that people hear about in the news all the time, and it's something that, like you said, business owners and individuals face all the time, and probably more often than they realize it.
So your career, you actually were named by Forbes magazine at one time as one of the nationwide 30 under 30 list for law and policy. I just wanted to bring that up to the audience to realize that you're highly credentialed and you're actually a partner at the firm, and we know that we're going to be able to depend on some of your information today. So as you work day to day at the firm, what pops up more than anything else, if I could ask?
Yeah, so I would say it's kind of a variety, but there's two big categories. The first is I have an idea for a logo, a brand, a business. How do I protect it? Just kind of that simple question.
Wow.
Which is actually much more complex than that.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other one is, oh no, I just got this letter, or I got I got sued because somebody is claiming I violated their IP rights. Is this real? What should I do? How do I deal with it? It really fits in those two big buckets, and those are by and large, the bulk of what intellectual property practice entails, and what my practice entails kind of on a daily basis, is those two big buckets of questions.
So that involves computer, or should I say more correctly, internet areas. So for instance, copyrights on websites, domain names as intellectual property. Do you run into those types of things?
Absolutely. The growth of the internet over the last 30 to 40 years has dramatically changed, expanded intellectual property law on an exponential basis. I mean, every year we're dealing with new issues that you would not necessarily have contemplated decades ago or even a few years ago. You mentioned domain name disputes. That's a huge area. There's actually a dispute resolution forum for stolen domain names specifically to address that issue. It implicates trademark law, because if you are using somebody else's trademark in your domain in order to direct people to yours, that's a trademark violation. Beyond that, the internet types of disputes really run the gamut of everything that you're gonna face in intellectual property law, from copyright infringement from posting videos or music that is owned by somebody else in a video that you post on YouTube or on your own site, to posting pictures owned by other people on your own site, to social media accounts. Who owns a social media account? Is that the intellectual property of your employer, or is it yours on your own? And then a new big growing area, this is kind of the buzzword for the last, year or two, and is probably going to be the buzzword for the next few years, is AI and artificial intelligence. And that is a fascinating area when it comes to intellectual property law. And it's kind of starting to turn what we thought about IP law on its head a little bit, and making courts face really, really difficult questions about how it impacts AI, which is becoming such a core part of our society and business moving forward. I mean, the biggest drivers of the stock market now are AI-related entities, and we saw what happened when you have a Chinese competitor come in and start to undercut that. And now that's, you've got these companies on both sides, whether they're operating AI-related products, or they're on the other side and they feel like they're impacted by AI. They're using intellectual property law to kind of set those boundaries, and it's really kind of become fascinating and really critical questions as we kind of move forward in this new AI-based economy.
Let's go back half a second. We have a lot of manufacturing here. We have a huge manufacturers association. Do you have a lot of folks with industrial ideas that come to you?
Yeah, absolutely. They've got industrial ideas of a product that they want to develop. And then let's say that happens. They come to us and say, we've got this product or this process that we want to use, we want to check. And there's a number of questions we have to talk through with them. Number one is, does somebody else own this? Is this a product that you under a contract for manufacturing for a customer of yours, and now you want to manufacture it directly. Do they own a patent on it? Even if they don't own a patent on it, do they have rights under some sort of contractual arrangement that you have with them, an NDA, a confidentiality agreement, an exclusivity agreement? And if not, if all of that's in the clear, then the question becomes, well, how do we protect it moving forward? And there's kind of two broad ways. One is what a lot of people know and understand as of patent law, and that's where you you come up with a design for an invention, you disclose it through the filing of a patent application, you get approval if it's novel and meets all the requirements, and then you have the exclusive right to manufacture that product for a certain number of years, 18, 20, kind of depends on the category of them. And then even if it's not, a lot of items, most items, inventions now are not patentable for whatever reason, because they already exist in similar ways, or they just are not, otherwise don't meet the requirements. And so the question becomes, how do we protect this still, even though we can't use patent law? And that's where the world of trade secrets comes in, and how we do that is through NDAs, confidentiality agreements, making sure that people who have the design, who are involved in the design process, who have access to those materials, are restricted from disclosing that, restricted from sharing it with others. And that's a way, the trade secrets law is a way to turn what maybe otherwise can't be protected intellectual property through the public mechanisms of patent, trademark, or copyright into a protected business proprietary asset that then the business can use to grow, make money, and proceed that way. And so a lot of people think, oh, well, I can't patent this. I guess I'm out of luck. Well, there's a lot of other things we can do with trade secrets law. Which is probably, I consider it part of intellectual property law. It's kind of the other side of the coin from trademark, copyright, and patent law. But it's one that businesses deal with, even if they don't know it, on a more regular basis than intellectual property law in the traditional context.
I heard something yesterday that was stunning, and I'm not as educated in this field as you are, but I pretty much got the picture. Someone had a trademark or some kind of protective document on his concept, and someone else came in and just filed something with the government, literally blockaded them from their own idea. Am I getting close to something that you've run into? It seemed like someone very large with a lot of money blockaded somebody who had an idea and couldn't proceed because all this company did was come in and sit on the concept. It doesn't sound ethical, but it seemed to be legal. In other words, I'll file for a patent on something you're doing just to blockade you from proceeding with it.
This is a question I get a lot from clients when they find out someone's done exactly what you said. This is, a pejorative term for that is our trolls or squatting. You mentioned domain names earlier. Domain name squatting. There are people whose business is to go out and to buy up domain names, even if they're not using them, and then sell them to people when they want them. You hear a lot about this in when a politician announces that they're running for president or something. It turns out, Hillary for president, somebody bought the domain name, right? Yeah. There's nothing wrong with it. It's perfectly legal. It only becomes an issue if you are infringing on someone's already used trademark. And so if somebody is using a let's say there's, Walmart, somebody buys the domain name, a domain of walmartoferie.com. Well, that's using Walmart's trademark, Walmart, and that's trademark infringement. So that's one area of that kind of squatting. That's called cyber squatting. Another area, more in the kind of what I'll call the troll category, is where you have these companies that all they do, their business is to either own patents that they aren't using or to own copyrighted material that they aren't using. Yes. And all they exist to do, the way they make money, is by suing or threatening to sue other people who are making similar items that they allege are infringing, and then collecting damages from them. We see a lot with, in the copyright world, a restaurant, a business may use a picture. Let's say they're advertising for an event, and they go online and they find a picture for let's say a food item that they're going to display or something like that. They just Google, they found the picture, they save the picture, they upload it to their Facebook page or to their event website. couple months later, they get a letter in the mail from right now. The name of the popular firm that does this is called Copycat Legal. They're the new kids on the block, and it says, you use this picture. Our client, Prepared Foods, that's the name, this generic name, owns the right to that. They've copyrighted it. You owe us $30,000.
Whoa.
And could you imagine you're a business owner and you get that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Whoa.
In your first reaction, we get one of two reactions from clients on those. One is they just ignore it and throw it away. And the other is panic, right?
Yes,
because it's $30,000.
Yes.
And unfortunately, it is legal. They own the right to that picture, and mistakenly, these businesses or companies accidentally use it because they don't necessarily know, and because it's not necessarily marked that way when they see it online. Now, are they on the hook for $30,000? Absolutely not. That's kind of that's the threat, right? If you don't respond and they have to sue you.
Yeah.
But it's something that a lot of businesses or a lot of clients think they can just ignore, but unfortunately have to take seriously. And to your point, is it's legal? Is it ethical? I think there's people would disagree about that, right?
Yes.
I certainly don't think that it's particularly ethical. Absolutely, my clients don't when it comes to them. And ultimately, what happens when these cases go before judges is judges have the discretion to look at kind of the real facts and circumstances, and they're never going to award those massive damages numbers.
Yeah.
But with the cost of litigation and the threat and the risk and just people don't want to deal with this. They want to deal with operating their business, right? And so what happens is people end up settling, and that's how these companies make their money, unfortunately.
But all due respect to you, that means a poor shopkeeper may end up with 20, 30, 50 hours at several $100s an hour just to get out of this rut accidentally or innocently using a name. Wow.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. Or, you're downloading the wrong picture, right?
Which happens all the time because things get passed around on the web. You never really see where they come from.
And people kind of a default assumption is, well, if it's on the internet, I can use it, right? Which it's really not actually the case.
Yeah.
And they these trolls almost want people to think that. And so they kind of disseminate these pictures in a way that, are almost kind of entrapment type of situation.
So I'm like Facebook or Microsoft. What's my liability for having a website that encourages this kind of online chat and these kinds of things happen? Are they liable for being the media, so to speak, for passing on these messages or this type of advertising?
They are, yeah.
Oh, they are.
They are technically, yeah. They are technically, but there's but the law protects them in a certain way. There's something called the DMCA, which is the Digital Millennium Copyright Act.
Wow.
And that serves to protect copyright holders, but it also gives a little bit of a safe harbor to the third parties that are hosting these. And what it is so let's say here, let me kind of walk you through an example. Let's say that I create a YouTube video that steals a lot of somebody else's copyright, whether it's a video or an audio, and even just assuming that I know it, that I know what I'm doing, or even if I don't, and I post it on YouTube. If the copyright owner finds that, they then send a notice to YouTube saying this item, it contains my copyrighted material. You need to take it down. And if you don't, you may be liable. Then what happens? YouTube, they take it down. That's kind of what's called a DMCA notice.
Okay.
And as a result, because these come YouTube, Facebook, they don't want to be on the hook. They end up taking those down, right? And they almost all now have their kind of internal, informal dispute resolution processes, which is actually really helpful, right? Because let's say I say, no, that actually isn't. I wrote that song. They may say, all right, well, submit what you want, alleged copyright holder, you submit, and we'll look and determine. And this is all to protect them. They create these processes to protect them from liability. And as you can imagine, they've got really good lawyers, really expensive lawyers. And so they spend a lot of time fighting these cases that put liability on them. And they've been able to achieve a lot of very good results in the courts. But there is still a level of liability that they have. And that's why they have these processes to help protect that, which ultimately ends up protecting copyright holders and individual users. If I accidentally post something with copyrighted material, I'd rather have it taken down or have to go through a process with YouTube than get hit with a federal lawsuit for $30,000.
So if I invent a new kind of peanut and it turns out that, can you really patent a formula or a recipe for a peanut that you would sell? Or is that just, what would that be? And there's been billionaires that have sold peanuts with some kind of formula, as you know. Is that protected?
Yeah, you mentioned a couple things in there that are protected in a couple different ways. If there is a new, I guess, lack of a better term, I'm not an agriculture expert, but a new formula, a new way to grow a different type of peanut, that could be protected under patent law. Absolutely.
Okay, yeah.
And similarly, well, not similarly, but if there is a recipe for a new product, for example, this is a good one to talk about, the recipe for Coke.
Right.
Nobody knows the recipe for Coke, right? You know why it's in a safe in Atlanta instead of, out there protected under patent, trademark, and copyright law?
No.
It's because patent, trademark, and copyright law don't protect things like recipes like that. It wouldn't be protected.
Oh, interesting.
Instead, it's a trade. It falls in the category of a trade secret because it's something that is not otherwise not considered protectable. Recipes are just not. If anybody can figure out a way to recreate a certain product, there's nothing stopping them from doing that, with a few minor exceptions. So instead, you protect it under trade secrets. The number one way to protect something like a recipe, a trade secret, is to, like you said, put it in a safe. Lock and key, a physical protection, so nobody else can access that unless you give them access. And certainly, the Coke recipe is probably exists in digital locations, certain places, and that's probably also protected by digital security, passwords, and the like. And then the most important way to protect a trade secret like that is through non-disclosure agreements, confidentiality agreements, things like that. And so that you are restricting, you're entering into an agreement with an employee or a third-party contractor, maybe to manufacture an item, and you're sharing with them trade secrets. And as part of that, you're saying you agree you will not disclose it. And if you do disclose it, there will be serious damages for that, lawsuits and the like. And so, it's not just the formula for Coke that's a trade secret. There's things that businesses deal with every day that are trade secrets. Kind of the more day-to-day things are internal price lists. Just imagine what would happen if your competitor had that. It could undercut you.
Yeah.
Yeah, your customer lists, your prospect lists, your R&D plans. These are things that businesses deal with every day that are trade secrets. And where it really becomes an issue, it's not really competitor like hacking or anything, that is corporate espionage. What it is, or where it comes up, is when an employer leaves and then goes to work for a competitor. Because a lot of times the competitor is hiring them because of that knowledge. And a lot of times the employee takes with them that information. That's where you get some really interesting, fast-moving cases.
I'm familiar with a couple of those. So poor Harlan Sanders' 7 herbs and spices may be locked away, but there's nothing to stop someone from trying to actually duplicate it with the same ingredients. Maybe not knowing what they are, but guessing what they are. This has just got to get so complicated. And your job is to protect. Right. Who do you protect more, the corporations or the people doing the suing? Is there any kind of trend, or you're basically just trying to expedite everything for everybody?
Yeah, I would say my practice, I tend to represent both because, we're located in Erie, Pennsylvania. We obviously have a number of large companies here, but we're not located in New York, D.C. Our firm doesn't exclusively represent, Fortune 100 companies. And so we're, and even then, IP infringement disputes can occur between major companies, and in fact, regularly do. And so there's not really kind of one side that I tend to deal with more than others. It's probably pretty 50-50 between people who want to take action to protect their rights and people who are getting accused of infringement.
Can I ask an overview question? And you intimated this prior. This is a big deal. This is getting to be more frequent by the day. Hundreds of companies being founded All you got to do is watch television. You see another name, individuals doing things. This has got to get so complicated that it must be difficult to keep track of where things come from. How do you investigate where an original idea comes from? Let's say I have one and I'm suing someone else, accusing them of stealing it. How do you make sure that the person coming to you is standing on firm ground, that they really were the originator?
It's difficult. It really is, for all the reasons you said. I mean, it's there's so much out there. There's so many sources. And so if someone comes to me and says, whether they come and say, I've got this idea for a trademark, or I want to trademark our company new brand line or something like that, we've got to investigate to make sure nobody else owns it. We can only really be so certain because there's not necessarily any way to know. Thankfully, this is one of the reasons why we have the public process that we have for patents, trademarks, and copyrights, so that you can search those databases and know. If somebody is using a trademark or is registered a trademark, you can search that database and know. Where it gets complicated is that you don't necessarily, it's not infringement just if it's identical. It's infringement if it's what's considered confusingly similar, and that's confusingly similar to a customer. Yeah. Well, that's a very subjective question, and so let me explain how the USPTO trademark process works. You apply for a trademark for a certain category of goods and services that you're going to operate under, and an attorney in Washington D.C. There are hundreds of them. They work for the PTO, and they search their database of registered trademarks to see if there's any that exist that they believe are confusingly similar. And it can be, this is humans doing these searches, and they are making an assessment of whether they think something is similar because it sounds the same, because it looks the same, which really ultimately becomes a very subjective question. And then if they believe it is, they'll reject it, and you can't get it trademarked. Now you can appeal that to a trademark trial and appeal board, and then ultimately through the courts. But again, it's a very subjective thing. And there are now, the number of trademarks that are filed is growing exponentially because of, as you can imagine, the extent of our electronic internet commerce world. New businesses, new brands, new social media influencers are trying to trademark different logos, names, and designs. And what's happened is because there's so many, the Patent and Trademark Office is overloaded. And so, number one, it takes forever. It used to take 2 to 3 months. Now it takes 9 months to a year to get a trademark. Yeah. And number two, they reject them more often than they used to because they say, well, they're just taking a harder line. And the good news is for business owners or individuals is that it's not the be all end all. If you can't get it registered, you can still use it. It still has protection. It's not as strong, but there's still a path. But like you said, this is incredibly complicated. It's only getting more complex as our economy changes and grows. And like I said, AI is a big part of that. And so, if you're starting a business or starting a brand line or a new product, it's definitely can be scary to make sure you're doing everything right and you're not going to infringe on somebody else's rights and that you're protecting your own rights.
Last question. I'm on ChatGPT, I tell it to write a paper for me or an article, just something that probably has some complexity to it involving businesses or something of the sort. And it prints this out for me, and I just take it and I use it as my own work of art or my own article, so to speak. What's going on with that? That doesn't belong to me, really, when ChatGPT or one of the other AI platforms writes something.
I'm glad you asked me that question because that is one of the questions that I think is going to be the defining IP question for the next few years faced by the courts. And the short answer is the same answer you're going to, the most popular answer people get from a lawyer, which is, it depends.
Yeah.
So what AI does, we don't know what is going on behind the scenes, right? We don't know where they're pulling from these sources. We don't know what Are they copying from articles or from other sources that are written by other people? We don't know because it's a black box. And so you're going to see, and you're already seeing this, two sets of cases. One is somebody, and this is news companies are starting to file these lawsuits saying AI is, when someone does exactly as you described, Tom, someone is creating this written work using AI, that AI system is using our copyrighted material, and therefore that's infringement. And the question then becomes, to what extent are they using that? Is it 10% of the written work product? Is it 100%? And that's a very typical copyright question, this copyright infringement question that you would get even before the internet. How similar is it? The rule of thumb, the legal rule, it has to be substantially similar. Well, again, that's a subjective, depends what a court would say.
Yeah.
But what you have here is you have the companies, these media companies, the news companies. They don't want to go after the individuals like you who does that and posts it. They're going after the AI companies, and so there was a lawsuit where they sued OpenAI. Yes, one of the company that operates ChatGPT, and they said, by using our copyrighted material to train your AI system, to develop our AI system, you have infringed on our copyrights. That the court that was analyzing that unfortunately gave us an unsatisfying answer. They basically said, well, we don't really know yet. We don't know to what extent that is an issue, and we don't see anybody that's been damaged because there's no end user that has actually infringed on it. They're just infringing in their internal way to develop the system. So this is an area where we're going to kind of have to wait and see what happens. The other flip side to that is, can you, as the quote unquote author that wrote it using ChatGPT, can you copyright that? Can you write a whole book using AI, and can you go register that with the Copyright Office? And then if somebody infringes on it, can you say, you owe me all royalties because you stole my book? That's another question that the courts have started to look at. And the rule of thumb, so far, it's not really a helpful rule of thumb, but the rule is there has to be sufficient human involvement. Well, what does that mean? That was what the Copyright Office said when they were approached with this question. Is it depends. What was the human involvement? And that's where you can kind of look at the history of the prompts, because when you use AI, you can ask it a simple question. You could say, write me a book about X, okay, and it could write you a book. Or you can give it a series of questions and say, all right, well, we're going to keep refining this, and those prompts may reflect a higher level of human involvement that's going to entitle you to more protection than if you simply say, write me a book. And so it's going to be subjective. The one thing I will say that I think we now know is with quite certainty on this is that, and this is key for business owners, and not just people who want to write works of fiction or written works for creative reasons, because a lot of people are using AI in business, is that the prompts that you write, the inputs into the ChatGPT, that's protected just like anything else under copyright law. Wow. You wrote it, you created that, you have protection over it. You can protect it both with copyright law and, like I said before, with trade secrets law by not disclosing it. So that's where we know there's protection, and that's where businesses can prioritize protecting their use of AI, is making sure those prompts and those inputs are kept secret, or if not, are adequately protected using the copyright process.
Excuse me, we've run out of time. I hate saying that. It's a passion. I hate saying we've run out of time. But with that, you have an open invitation to come back and do a part 2, because you've opened up at least another hour of good discussion on this, and I think people would be really glad to hear more about it. So, hearty thanks to you, Alex Cox, attorney at the Knox Law Firm. Thank you for taking time out of your busy day to sit and talk with us.
And thank you for having me, Tom.
Think about the last time you heard a story on WQLN NPR that stuck with you. Maybe it made you think. Maybe it made you smile. Either way, it was here when you needed it. That's because of listener support. Now we need you. We're working toward a $70,000 goal, and your gift, whatever feels right, keeps the station strong. Go to WQLN.org to give. Thanks for being a part of our family.
Beer enthusiasts, get ready. The Erie Craft Beer Fest 2025 is coming to the concourse at Union Station on April 12th. Join us for a day of exceptional brews, unique flavors, and great company. Discover craft beers from the region's finest breweries and celebrate our love for hops and barley. April 12th, 2025, it's a date. Don't miss out on the ultimate craft beer lovers experience. Get your tickets at wqln.org/beer.
I'm Jennifer Minsky, and I am the owner of Pop Lock Popcorn. It's been interesting to watch our shop evolve over time. We've been here 6 years. Being an independent business owner, I had to learn how to do everything myself, and I had to learn. When our staff was offering curbside service, our one employee would dress in costume and take the popcorn out to customers. We do a flavor change every single day on our board. So we offer 3 staple flavors every day, which would be our generic Jenny, which is our salted butter popcorn. We have 2 different cheddars, whether we do a white or traditional orange cheddar, and then we have our homemade caramel, and then everything else we rotate. So our signature dishes, a lot of times maybe we'll use a local product, or we'll do something with pop culture. We use a lot of different local products in our popcorns. We try to feature a lot of local businesses too. So whether we use sponge candy, we do a pepperoni ball one, we use local beer or local distilled products. So we use a lot of different bakeries.
To see the full episode, visit WQLN PBS NPR on YouTube.
Welcome to We Question and Learn, and we are now celebrating our 21st year on the air here at WQLN FM 91.3, WQLN NPR. Our NPR One affiliation is now all on NPR.org, so you don't have to type the extra letters in. You'll find the WQLN website, you'll find the We Question and Learn program, and you'll also see about more than a dozen other venues where the podcast has extended to in the last 5 or 6 years. Today, we're very, very honored to have a person who's celebrating a new day in his career. Jonathan Rilling taking over the CEO reins of the Erie Homes for Children and Adults. And now, did you send Chuck Walczak to Florida subsequent?
Thanks, Tom. Chuck has been enjoying pseudo-retirement. He's still on an emeritus contract with us until the end of the fiscal year in support of me and the board.
Well, I warn other board members and employees that you just don't get to leave the building.
Right.
And on the telephone is Jessica Krugger. Jessica, I hear you have a beginning or somewhat of a beginnings to your career at some organization. Can you tell us what that was?
Yeah, so in college, I did about 2.5 years of an internship with WQLN. I came on in sophomore year, which at that time I interviewed with Tracy Ferrier, and she said that it was very unusual to begin that early, but that she would bring me on, and it was a very, very good decision. And that actually set me up on a nonprofit path. That was not something that I was exploring until my time with WQLN, and I really fell in love with the mission-based work. So thank you.
Well, Jonathan, I can put a reference in that she got a good start from a very professional. In fact, her mentor ended up in a very prominent PBS position. So we're sure that Jessica has some great credentials. Jonathan, it's been years. We've talked for years and years.
Sure.
Actually, I've spoken with your predecessor many times and his predecessor. And all 3 of you know or knew your organization is a very soft spot in my heart for what you do. So let's talk about mission, vision. First of all, congratulations on your new career. And I'm sure you're going to do a great job. You've been there, I think, a dozen years already. Is that right?
Yeah, it's officially 13 last month.
Yeah.
And thank you for what you've done for us in the past, Tom. We appreciate the relationship you've had and the time, treasure, and talent that you've put back into us.
Well, as we speak about this, I think people will immediately understand why this is so important to our community and exemplary, I believe, to other communities around the country. Jonathan, start with what you do. That would be a good thing for people to be able to understand what Erie Homes for Children and Adults is all about.
Sure. So EHCA, our mission is to assist people with disabilities to live rich and fulfilling lives. And really one of our differentiators that we have is the population that we care for not only has an intellectual disability, but also medically complex concerns on top of that diagnosis.
That sounds very simple, and I'm not criticizing you, but having been in the facility, these are very important people that need quite a bit of care. See, we're skirting the issue, but I think if people would go to your website, or Jonathan, maybe you have a more succinct way of describing your services.
So yeah, it's, we're probably one of about 5 providers in the Commonwealth that can take the acuity of cases that we take. So again, these are people who are considered our state's probably most vulnerable citizens, individuals, again, that not only have the intellectual disability diagnosis, but also maybe feeding tubes, maybe ventilators, just very profoundly disabled individuals that we look to advance and give them every opportunity that so many of us take for granted every day.
You and I years ago talked about it, how difficult this is, because this is something that you typically would not take a lot of photographs of. These are very important private people. Very difficult to take video or even do, and I think you did do some sort of television outreach a while back, but it's very difficult because not only do you respect the state or the condition of the people you serve, but it's beyond description, Jonathan. I don't even know if there is a way to describe specifically the kind of folks that you serve so well.
Yeah, and Tom, you used to help us with the tours that we used to do at the facilities whenever everybody was here, where Jessica and I are sitting on East 27th Street. And we would caution people that if you're not used to that population, to come in and get to know them a little bit and see that they're really no different than you or I, that they just need a little help throughout their day.
I would talk to political leaders, community leaders, and I would try and say, if you ever think that you have a tough scenario, ask Jonathan for, not a tour, but, a tour. You have a guided tour. How does that work?
Yeah, so obviously, like so many nonprofits, that kind of process really had a monkey wrench thrown into it with the COVID pandemic.
Yes.
But we are starting to tour folks through the community homes. We do want to thank Erie and Crawford County and Venango County, for that matter. That's kind of our footprint, but for their acceptance of the people that we serve in the community. And that's really what the Commonwealth wants, is that idea of integration. And that's what we really live to try to provide each day. But Jessica or myself would be happy to run anybody through one of our community homes that would like to learn more about us. We do try to respect the fact that it is the individual's home, but if you give us a little bit of notice, we can coordinate that for you.
Talk about your main location. Tell us what it looks like, what activities are there, and who do you serve?
So recently, we conducted a several-year capital campaign to move everybody out of the facility that Jessica and I are in right now. And we are proud to be a long-serving East Side Erie nonprofit. So the building that we're in was actually opened in 1928. At one point, it was home to 60 individuals that we provided care to. And the capital campaign was basically launched to take all the people out of this facility and put them in the community in 4 6-bed community homes for a total of 24 beds. We are blown away with the support that the community stepped up with for that project, and we are in the process rapidly of completing the 4th and final home, which is located on Cascade.
That's fantastic. Forgive me, that's a new way of helping the people in our community that you serve, right? I mean, the concept of a residential, would I be correct in saying a residential facility?
Yeah, 100%. Up until the 80s and the Tom Ridge administration, it was kind of the thought of the day that if you had a child with challenges, you kind of wanted out of sight, out of mind treatment for them. Which, nobody believes in that anymore across the state, thank God. So the idea is to bring these folks into the community so that they can thrive in the community like we all do. We all want that opportunity to make choices in our daily day and have opportunities to learn new things and interact with others. And it's no different for anybody with disabilities.
So reiterate the number of people you serve in the community, please.
Yeah, so we just found out we're listed as the 28th largest employer in Erie County, which we're very proud to hear. And we serve 500 people a day through 3 counties with a staff of around 580 employees.
Now, someone said, well, that doesn't sound efficient, but what I'm thinking
we're
of is
lean, mean, fighting machine.
I having visited, I don't think that's enough. Now, you're including your medical people, your everyday staff, fantastic management people like Jessica there, and I'm going to bother you in a second. So 580, and you may be able to benchmark this relative to other organizations of your type across the country. Is this about right, or are you shorthanded?
So we right now, one of my strategic pillars for 2025 is retention of our employees. So we are a mid-sized disability services provider in the parlance of Pennsylvania. So we feel our size is just right, kind of like the Goldilocks. We're not too small, we're not too large, and that allows us to be able to adapt and change much more fluidly. We have a nice low overhead, which we've kind of crafted over years with help with our board through very efficient fiscal management. And as I said, we're about a handful of providers that will take the level of cases that we take in the state.
Now, this is going to be a tough question. There are those you serve right now, and you're doing a great job. People can check on that statement for themselves. Are you able to serve everyone that has the kind of needs that you can take care of? Are there more folks out there that need help?
Yeah, Tom, you and I have talked about this, and I'm a firm believer in that every nonprofit should exist to kind of accomplish their mission and say, job well done, victory. With disability services, unfortunately, that will never happen. So right now there is a large statewide waiting list of people waiting to receive some sort of disability service.
It's sort of sad that there are this many folks who are in need. Are we, not you, your organization, or maybe not even the state, are we as a society or a community in our state, for example, or in our area, really aware of the need? I know you do a great deal of education, but what do you think is missing?
Yeah, so Governor Wolf, followed by Governor Shapiro, have been great with addressing the statewide waiting list. It was just in the budget proposal last week from Governor Shapiro. So it's top of mind in Harrisburg. A lot of people feel that, government should exist to take care of those that can at least take care of themselves. And that's certainly with a lot of the folks that we serve on a daily basis. So I think the amount of providers out there it can help to address that waiting list. But unfortunately, even with all the medical advances that we have in society right now, we're still unclear about why people are born with disabilities in the first place. We certainly know that there are, risky behaviors that pregnant moms can engage in, and that's what our Project First Step program addresses. But all in all, disabilities occur, and agencies like ours need to be around to help the parents whenever that takes place.
I'm going to ask you to pass the mic over to Jessica Krugger, and your title is Director of Advancement for Erie Homes for Children and Adults. What's your job description?
That's a great question. So when I give my sort of little elevator spiel as far as what I do, the short version is that all fundraising, communications, and marketing is the very short SparkNotes version of that.
Jonathan, you didn't give her much to do.
No.
A lot of organizations, those titles are 3 different individuals.
Yes.
From my experience. Yep. So you are being efficient with your payroll and paychecks. On a daily basis, what's a typical day for you?
I don't know that I've had a typical day yet, frankly, but in essence, I'm still new to this role myself, just starting a few months ago. So there's been a lot of getting a lay of the land. I have been working to meet our homes, meet those that we serve, meet our staff that are boots on the ground doing the work, meeting everybody who can educate me on what it is that EHCA does best. And then also how I, in turn, can communicate that to our supporters, to the public who wants to know exactly what you're asking. What is it that we do? How do we do it? What the needs are. So this has been a lot of learning to begin with, and then taking that information and explaining it to everybody else, making sure that supporters know what it is that they've been supporting all these years, what we're doing, connecting them to the individuals, like Jonathan said earlier, really showing that they're just like us. They just might need an extra hand in their day beyond what you or I need. So making those connections has been really a big part so far. Jonathan alluded to the fact that we have a large workforce. So communicating with them as well. We've been working to make sure that everybody knows what's going on through this transition process with Jonathan, what the future looks like, just making sure everyone's on board. So it is a big job, but I've been very happy to take the reins of it.
As Jonathan knows, I used to say to Chuck Walczak, your predecessor, your job is like having both hands tied behind your back, because not only do you have to make sure the money is there, you have to do it in a way where you can't just run around and put huge media campaigns.
Right, correct. Yep.
On television, radio's a little easier, but still it's tough, as in this case. We're not going to do a bio on someone, and I left your building in tears. That's all I'm going to say to people, and that hopefully will give them an idea of what's happening there. So, Jonathan, you have help, and you must have a good board. Could you talk about your board of directors?
Yes. So our board's fantastic, comprised of 17 individuals right now. And I say to people in the community, nobody is on the board for a resume booster at this point, because they would have left a long time ago. Yeah. It is a working board. It's an active board. Many committee meetings. And monthly board meetings, and everybody is invested. Everybody here might say it differently, but everybody's here for the mission, and the board is no different. We have some long tenured folks on there. We have some new blood. We do a really good job with governance and recruiting, in my opinion, and it's a thoughtful process, and the selections are made very carefully.
With that said, how do you fill money bags? How does your budget get funded?
So right now we have a federal match on what Pennsylvania agrees to pay annually to people with disabilities. Okay. Jessica exists and myself in my prior role to fill in the void in that funding, which, with everything going on right now, that funding is in question in 2025, early in 2025. So our efforts are becoming even more strategic. We do and adopt a major gifts fundraising approach here. I learned that from one of my mentors, Ted Wood, who the agency invested with me early on, which I'm very appreciative of. Yes. And Ted's outlook, coupled with what Jessica was alluding to, a storytelling approach for the people that we serve, has worked very, very well for EHCA.
Ted's been on the program. I've known him for years and years, probably more years than he would care to tell you, but he is an extremely well-versed educator. He's been in this arena for decades, and boy, I hope he doesn't retire. Maybe he did, because there were rumors that he was going to, but your mentor, and after hearing different phrases that you used and that Jessica used, I really can hear his advice echoing through both of you, and unequivocally, it is probably the most successful and most professional way to fundraise in the 21st century. Yep. How is that going this year? You don't have to really give me any numbers, but is there a change in people's attitudes just generally in helping you, or even, in your opinion, a nonprofit out in 2025?
I thank the community so much for the support that they have provided. We have generational givers, obviously, here because of the history that we have in Erie County, which is a touching thing to see. We'll get good-sized donations that come in and say, this was my grandmother's favorite nonprofit to give to, and I want to keep that legacy giving going. Mm-hmm. We do well with bequests. That's something that we want to build on always, as all nonprofits do. But so far, we've been blessed with nice planned giving activities here at the agency. And certainly grants are always important, and we are very strategic with our annual events as well. Right now we only have 2 because we've really looked behind the scenes and found out that these two that we've selected do generate the most net income, which is always important whenever nonprofits are looking at events.
You can identify those if you do.
Oh, okay. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, thank you. So we have our Golden Gatsby Gala, which is coming up May 10th, 2025 at the Ambassador. And it is, I believe, the 100-year anniversary of the Great Gatsby book. So we're super excited about being able to theme that again this year, and it's worked out very well for the agency every year that we've held it. And then in the summertime is our Victory Ride, which will take place Saturday, August 23rd, 2025 at our MOVE facility, which is to the west by Wegmans West.
Yeah, good deal. Of the fundraising mechanism, what percentage of your gross is this direct fundraising?
So right now, I would say it's about 10%.
Oh, my goodness. Okay. So you are critically dependent on the state and the matching federal money. And 10% is a lot of money for this community, but that could be a stress. Do you see gaining any help elsewhere? Or is this going to be, as has been the case of many of the long-term nonprofits here, going to be a planned giving / endowment / Erie Community Foundation funding mechanism for you?
For sure. And the endowment is more important now than ever. And that's something that is a vital part of our strategic plan that we have out there. The strategic plan, thanks to our board chair, is really, everybody says it, but it's really a living, breathing document right here. So, Jessica and I are going into a meeting after this to talk about the what if scenarios if funding would go away. Certainly, as I've said, Governor Shapiro and his team have been very supportive of people with disabilities and autism. So that's been great. That's been great. And as I alluded to earlier, Governor Wolf was as well, but Governor Shapiro even more so.
If I can piggyback here for a second too, I think everybody is paying attention to what is taking place, and I think that they're watching their local nonprofits to see what's happening and how they're impacted. And I think if some of these changes do transpire throughout this year, transparency, I think, with our supporter base is going to be significant. It kind of harkens back to COVID for me, in the sense that, everybody was sort of going through something at that point, regardless of which side of anything you fell on. And I think communicating the need for, here's what we're doing, here's how we've been impacted, and here's how you can help. I think that resonates with people. And I think the Erie community is full of generous, giving people, and they just want to hear how they can help. So, if that government funding is impacted, I have no doubt that the EHCA community will definitely step up and help where they can. I think it's just our communication on that end to say, here's what we need.
Jonathan, talk about for a second, if you could, about other organizations across the country that do what you do.
Yeah, so basically, I can speak for the Commonwealth because that's what I'm most familiar with. And the Pennsylvania system is a very good system. So we will see parents that will move from even Ohio or New York to get into Pennsylvania because of the quality disability services that are provided here. And as I said earlier, there's just not many providers that will take the cases that we take. And whenever we talk about the cases, we are geared more to help people with medically complex conditions, but then there's also providers out there that are very geared towards helping people with behavioral complex conditions. So you'll see that kind of divide whenever you're talking about a provider's niche, so to speak, across the state. And we all know who does what, and we all play very nicely in the sandbox, which is great because, again, it goes back to supporting the individual with disabilities come hell or high water, essentially. So we have a great creative staff, and we do not say no. So we're going to work with the staff and the parents to really customize programming for their kiddo and help them out.
How do you manage planning for expansion? I guess you're handcuffed by your budget, although would you need to double it, maybe up at 25% in order to take on the folks that are not able to get into your system?
Yep. Good question. So we have a smart growth strategy. So we do not grow just to grow. And the community homes that we discussed earlier are not cheap dates by any means. And they're not Taj Mahals, but we feel that any home that we provide, we would live in ourselves. We would move our families into that home. So that's always been kind of our vision with any of our community homes that we do. We are always open to opportunities. So if there is an opportunity out there where we would have to accelerate growth quickly, we're fine in doing that. And again, in concert with our strategic planning committee of the board, all those decisions are always talked about and kind of triaged on a monthly basis.
Before I run out of time, I would like to ask a question. How do you interface with the healthcare community?
Yeah, so we feel that, hospitals exist to make people feel better and eventually get back home. If you've ever been in the hospital, the first thing you're always asking the doctor is, when can I go home?
Yep.
And the people differ in our care in that these folks are not going to get better. So what we need to do is we need to provide them the most comfortable, respectable living experience that presents them with opportunities and quality of life that we can provide. So we work nicely with the hospitals in that, unfortunately, sometimes our folks do have to go to the hospitals, and sometimes the stays might be a little longer than typical population stay. So we have a great relationship with UPMC Hammett and also with St. Vincent's, and we work with their team to kind of educate their staff on the needs of people with disabilities, how to communicate with somebody who doesn't necessarily communicate like you and I and Jessica does. So the hospitals have been great to work with for many years.
Last question. Are things going to change in the next couple of years? And maybe the answer to that is you're going to have more folks to serve. Do you see any respite in this or any change? Is technology in our society helping mitigate the type of care or the type of people you care for?
Yeah, very, very good question, Tom. The AI is out there. We are starting to hear about it more on a statewide level. Obviously, there's an investment there for the agency to consider if we do go down that road. Right now, we are exploring opportunities to work smarter and not harder, and AI is certainly part of that. I do see things changing as technology is just moving quicker than any of us, I think, could probably imagine even 3 years ago. The speed in which changes are coming to our front doorstep. But again, we have a great team in that we kind of always embrace those. We're trying to be as proactive as possible. That's part of our brand promise. And we really welcome those changes and opportunities with open arms.
Jessica, this question is for you. How do people find you?
Oh, hey, that's an easy one. So as Jonathan has mentioned, our main and one of our original buildings is on East 27th Street, right in the heart of the east side of Erie, not too far from Palaco's and Mighty Sign, which we tend to visit. We, of course, have our website, EHCA.org, and we are also on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And we really do welcome anybody who has any questions, really wants to see more of what we're doing. I'm happy to conduct tours of any of our homes, any of our community programs to kind of put some faces to our work and to explain a bit better.
Website, telephone number, would that be okay to deliver right now?
Yep.
It's EHCA.org.
Yes.
And the telephone number is 814-454-1534.
So I tell my guests, this is the part of the program I hate. We're out of time, so subsequent, because of I see about a dozen other topics, or at least 6 that I'd like to ask you about. I hope I can invite both of you to come back maybe later in the year and maybe expound on some specifics.
Yeah, that would be great.
Yeah, on specific services. It's a tough topic it's tough to do it on television. It's more simple to do it on radio, but visit the website, call you with questions. If you're doing the tour, I hope they take the time out of their lives to even spend a half hour and really understand what Erie Homes for Children and Adults is all about. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tom.